Welcome to the place where we learn about and learn from the leaders in our field who are powering human creativity. I am Aaron Dworkin, and this is Arts Engines. Thanks again for joining me here on Arts Engines. Today's guest is Alice Jones, who serves as Assistant Dean of Community Engagement and Career Services at the Juilliard School. Alice, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me. I didn't even have to leave Juilliard.
Right, exactly. See, this is perfect. So we had our modern technology at work. So I definitely want to kind of talk about especially entrepreneurship and how you're really preparing, the students there at Juilliard for kind of the lives they will end up leading. But first, I thought it'd be great for our audience just to get a sense of what's kind of the breadth of your role at Juilliard and what you oversee.
Absolutely. Breadth is probably a good way to describe it because community engagement and career services are huge. Within the conservatory model, there's so much that a school like Juilliard does to build students' artistic skills, right? That whole box of technique that is going to allow them to express whatever they want to express through their music, through their dance, through their drama. But the career of being an artist in the 21st century is more than your technique. Your technique is not enough. That's not the thing that's going to keep you sustained and whole as a person. It's not the thing that gets you called back. It's not the thing that lets you create opportunities when it seems like there are none and everything is closing around you or nobody's calling you back. And so our offices of community engagement and career services are all about connecting students and alumni to opportunities and resources beyond the classroom and studio. It's really joyful work. Our job in the midst of all the other pressures of the arts world is not to say, do this in a particular way, not to fit in a lane, but simply to say, yes, how can we help you do that as best as possible? So what we do is we administer fellowships for students so they can learn to perform and teach beyond the walls of a conservatory. We administer a gigging program so that they can learn to contract with clients, think about how to negotiate, how to build an ensemble when you need to do a performance. We administer grants. We give away almost $100,000 a year for students to be able to create their own endeavors, to get all the materials and resources they need for their careers, but also to do the things they're kind of like itching on the inside that really feel like they need to get made. And then we also do a lot of other passive programming. We do unlimited career advising for all students and alumni. There's really nothing that we say no to. It's just how do we do it as best as possible?
It is absolutely awesome. And again, I love that breadth that you mentioned of that. And in some ways, I think, right, preparing for a career these days in the arts requires breadth of preparation. And kind of curious, your sense today for art students today, if you were looking at and they were saying, okay, you know what, if there's the top one or two things, skill sets that I'm going to need to really build the career that I want to have, do you have a sense of kind of what is that you're like, you know what, that gives you comfort when you see a student's got this skill set, they're going to be all right when they're out there in the world? Any sense of that?
I know some things that come up a lot and when we're doing career advising or the big questions when somebody's graduated and they're like, wait a minute, nobody's building my schedule for me. How do I fill my own days? And I guess it really comes down to three things. One of them that we come back to over and over again is what's the work that it takes to know yourself, right? To know your own values, to know your goals, to know your strengths, to know your proclivities, to know what lights you up. Right? Like, do you have control and agency over who you are moving through the world? The second thing, and I think this is really hard in really elite conservatory spaces, is to look around and know your community and know what's happening around you, right? You don't have to reinvent the wheel. You don't want to siphon off resources from excellent work that's already happening around you. What are the holes that need to be filled? So knowing yourself, how can you help the people around you? And I guess the third thing is kind of a combination of both of those. But when I'm doing a lot of career advising, I talk with my students about constructive envy, Like, who is moving through the world in the way you want to move? Who has the lifestyle you want? Who's having the impact that you want to have? Okay, great. That's where you want to be. What are the skills and experiences that those people have that you don't have yet? And you've made a pathway for yourself, or you've made a checklist for yourself of what you need to do next.
Awesome. I love that. I love that. And especially a positive form of envy, looking and saying, hey, there are examples out there already of the approach you want to take. And
Mhm.
how can you emulate that? I absolutely love that. And is there also kind of sometimes, students or administrators and educators are this balance of the technique, the artistic skill versus the, if you will, life skills, entrepreneurial skills, and kind of balancing. And a lot of times students are like, well, I've got to do this time in the practice room. I don't have time for this, or I don't have time to learn how to network. Or other students are like, well, I really need to do the networking. I can't do any sense. And what do you share with students about how they address that balance, and or what do you teach about that?
Oh gosh. I mean, I think about what it's meant for me to be a faculty member in teaching in schools and teaching in, summer festivals, what it's meant to be a part of a chamber music ensemble. And it's like, yeah, we're going to rehearse a lot and we're going to sit down, we're going to hash out curriculum, but most of our time is spent in being human beings, right? Most of our time is really spent in like, who was a good colleague to work with? How do we resolve that conflict? How did I get to know this person that I'm going to have to like live and breathe with while we're on tour together? There's the technique is necessary, but it's not sufficient from my perspective, right? It's not the only thing. And, I talk with my students also about, in this path towards building your like constructive envy, and you start to build on these skills and experiences that take you in the direction of what somebody else has done, you might turn around and discover you've got enough already happening for yourself. You don't even have to emulate this path that somebody else has taken. But at the same time, you're also going to look around and say, gosh, at some point in your career, who's not there anymore, right? Who stopped getting invited back, or who stopped being part of that circle, who you're like, I don't need to chase that person anymore because I've got enough right where I am.
Right, absolutely. And so also I'm curious, kind of, how did you come to this work, right? Your life experiences lend such experience, wisdom, talent, and all of that to do this work. So curious, how did you come to this work?
That is, oh my gosh, I think the story that I tell depends on what mood I'm in that day, because there's the version of it where I realized what it meant to be part of this field when I had to really start talking to people outside of it. When I was teaching music appreciation to non-musicians, groups of 60, 70 people at once every single semester for several years. And I had to justify, well, why do I want you to listen to Beethoven? Do I want you to listen to Beethoven? How does this world work? Right. So that's a version of the story that I might tell. Another version of the story that I might tell involves getting hit by a car and having to rework my whole career to figure out, how do I support myself, and what value do I have in terms of what I love about music, what I can do for the world of music, and that doesn't require me to have my flute in my hands all the time. And then there's the version of this that is really driven by the institutional jobs that I've held as well. And that vantage point of learning how to think about management skills, or learning how institutions work, learning about the philanthropic landscape. And so all of those might be versions of the story that I might tell, or, different chapters in a book, maybe.
Absolutely. Well, it is absolutely awesome. Unfortunately, we're running a little short on time, but I always like to ask of all my guests, there's got to be some tougher days in this work, and or challenges that may even seem like they're insurmountable. What do you draw on as a leader for inspiration, for strength, or for guidance during the toughest of times?
I think in the toughest of times, the people around you are always the thing that keep you going, right? People don't join organizations, people join people. And it's the members of my family that I can call up at any moment. It's the inside jokes with the members of my staff. It's the limitless possibility that my students bring, from my tiniest flute players all the way up through my college students. But I think on the day-to-day, I just love to consume content. I love TikTok. I love reading. I love the newspaper. The world is so big and the world is so beautiful.
Wow. Alice Jones, you truly are one of the arts engines who is powering human creativity in our world. Thank you so much for everything you do and everyone you inspire and inform. And thank you for being on the show.
Thank you for having me. This is a delight.